Surrealism, and How Did It Reflect the Time? By Mackenzie O'Connor and Diego Hernandez. So, what is surrealism? Well, by book definition, it's the psychic automatism in its pure state by which we propose to express verbally, in writing, or in any other manner, the real process of thought, the dictation of thought in the absence of any control exercised by reason and outside any aesthetic or moral concerns. Which in normal terms is simply the idea of nonconformity, being individual and not complying with normal social standards set by the higher society. Surrealism is mostly used as a political statement as well as an art movement, and stands on grounds of social revolution. Surrealism started in Paris after World War I. It derived from Dadaism, which is a form similar but less violent. Dada expressed disgust for war, or life in general, that European culture lost meaning to them by creating pieces of anti-art or non-art. The name Dada actually came from making it seem like it just came from a baby. It's not developed, it's not good, which is why they felt that the society deserved ugly art that wasn't pleasing or aesthetic to the eye. Dada had a combat type feeling with a bad attitude directed toward violence and protest. After Dada was considered dead, it planted the seeds of a new movement which would soon become Surrealism. Started in Paris, obviously, by poets and writers who were influenced by Dada ideas but had a more artistic values and not quite as so violent. Andre Burton, the Pope of Surrealism. He was one of the main leaders of Surrealism and definitely led the movement on into bigger and better things. He was a French poet. He thought that he combined the conscious and subconscious into an absolute reality. He explained the meaning of surrealism, which meant a kind of fusion of elements of fantasy with the art of the modern world to form a new, better reality. The biggest thing that I think he put out there was that being a surrealist didn't mean that you had talent. Just speaking your thoughts or painting them as they happened made you a surrealist. Now with Diego, some influences of surrealism.
Sigmund Freud is one of the most important people of Surrealism because of his inspiration of psychology. This inspiration led to different kinds of interpretations for Surrealism. They are optimistic and realistic. Optimistic is the creative force of what is believed was unconscious in art. Realistic is the theory that rigid representation of the truth, reality is essential to art and literature, and therefore the ugly and vulgar must be included. Karl Marx, surrealist political, took political ideas from Marx, believed that the key to personal and social freedom lay in the unconscious mind similar to Freud. Salvador Dali was an important artist and writer during the Surrealism period. He was also famous for his wild art and public personality. One of his famous books was The Secret Life of Salvador Dali. This book was inspired to do by Dutch masters of the 17th century. The book was an autobiography about his life during his 30s. In his book, he talked about his writings, art, and sketches. Not only did he write about also painted, he mainly painted about fear of sex and his dreams. These became famous due to his realistic qualities in his paintings and because he used symbolic images to show his unconscious. Because of his realistic and unconscious paintings, he was considered a surrealism artist. Pablo Picasso, although considered surrealism, is actually a cubist. He is considered a surrealism painter because of his ideas of unconscious. Picasso became a cubist by his friends Baroque. Baroque introduced him to Cézanne. Cézanne then inspired him to be a cubism artist. Most of his paintings were influenced by his wife. Even after his wife left him, he still is still influenced by her. He also used symbols and minotaurs in his paintings.
So, what is occurring during this time? During World War One, people experienced the reality of total war and didn't care much for it. People eventually, after the war, became pacifists, especially the younger generations that were born and raised during. People sought for peace between all the countries and wanted it to stay that way. Many different art forms and music were developed during the Age of Anxiety. The war left society of Europe damaged, vulnerable, and wanted something different and peace-oriented. While the Surrealist movement sparked from Dada the hatred of war and life in general, the Great Depression in the 1920s only gave way to the dead high hopes for the future. Because during the Age of Anxiety, people didn't really have a clear answer about anything anymore, and the worse that life became, the basically the answer given to them by what the future beholds was not very good. The Age of Anxiety greatly affected the Surrealist movement, with how the paintings are described as anxious questions and questions with no answers to get as well in literature. As Surrealism derived from Dadaism, as stated earlier, they were completely against war. Even after World War I, the leader of Dada disbelieved in the League of Nations' notion of lasting peace after the war, relating back to how people had this weird idea that everything was going to be perfect in the future, but then everything went wrong, and now they don't know anymore. But the Dada movement gave back an anti-art against a society who let monstrosities happen. During World War II, and even before, during the Age of Anxiety, Surrealism was born from the dead ideas of Dada, which has been stated before. Most Surrealist artists expressed intense emotion, as you can see with Dali's Metamorphosis of Narcissus, 1937. Each side shows a different extreme of life. On the right, you can see the growth of the seed and the lighter colors, but on the right, the left, you see the seed is decaying or shriveling up, and the colors are darker red, gold, golden. In the back, you can see people looking half dead and starving. But then in the sky, in between both pictures, you see a bright, clear blue sky. This could be directly related to World War II and how mass destruction and insurmountable deaths have been occurring during this time. Continuing with World War II had the biggest impact on Surrealism and the art by Surrealist artists, reflected by this time period and how war affected the lives of people. Many artists had dark themes relating to their artwork, especially during World War II did artists express what war was doing to people and themselves, such as Max Ernst's L'Occhio del Silenzio. The piece shows different objects and things melting together, with one creature down in the bottom right. You see how, because of the creature that's there, that everything is just melting or falling apart or becoming distorted. The dark clouds giving menace to the piece, directly relating to the uncertainty of who would win in the war while this was being painted. So as you can see, they really did reflect the time and how life was for people there, and how bad it was, and how people were being mentally scarred by what was happening. And since the Surrealist movement, since being a Surrealist, you pull things out that came from your mind at that moment, being put into these pieces of art. They show you what was really happening during that time. Like most artists, they painted or created artwork on how they felt, what they saw, and what they think, and generally reflect the time that they lived in or live in. Which, like Surrealism, did the same thing. They painted, reflect the war and politics and what it was really like during that time period. Even today, Surrealism still has a role in art and how it shaped the art world. Are we excited? The end.